Hi, it's January 22nd, and this is another installment of Up Yours with the Unknown Pundit. Me, ordinary nobody, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing here is just trying to get some stuff out of my chest and my head, my bed head. Noise and thoughts and feelings, and what I'm doing is I find that by talking about it a little bit, it helps me feel better, regain a measure of sanity and serenity. Just by talking about things, it seems to help, and God knows I need a lot of help. But what I really want to address right now is the fact that with January, we've just observed the anniversary of January 6th, and I know many of you will remember, unless you have Alzheimer's, no joking, but you'll remember on January 6th, 2021, thousands of the MAGA cult, at the behest of their Godhead, descended on our nation's capital, and beyond the doors knocked down and windows knocked out, the assaults. I think sometimes people forget the fact there are half a dozen people that died there that day, and that's not even counting the cops that committed suicide in the immediate afterwards. And it's sad. It's more than tragic. Here you are doing your job of protecting and serving, making sure the Capitol is safe for tourists and visitors, for the people that live, work, play, and worship there. And suddenly there's this malicious mob coming in with using the American flagpoles to bludgeon your colleagues. And that's repugnant. But even beyond that, something that doesn't get talked about a lot, during the pandemonium of that day, and amidst all the chaos, the commotion, there were people who ran into the Capitol who actually took time to drop trowel, squat, and take a big shit on the floor. And if that wasn't enough, some came along and scooped it up, started smearing it on the walls and hallways, floors. I mean, we know about the reports of what they did in Nancy Pelosi's office, but I'm not talking about her private office. I'm talking about the building, the institution itself being smeared with shit by people who turn around and call themselves patriots. I remember our country was founded on this concept of by the people, for the people, and of the people. So that property, it doesn't belong to Trump and his minions. It doesn't belong to any senator or congressman. It belongs to the people. So what they shit on was something that belonged to you, belonged to me, belonged to us. And that building is the greatest symbol of democracy and liberty that is known to the world. So vital to our history, vital to our functioning as a nation. So the idea that people would just go in there and shit all over it. I know some people are driven, by these conspiracy theories. The election was stolen, and they use that to justify what they did. But the truth is, even after all these years, Trump's own judges, investigators, there's been not one scintilla of proof, evidence, only the assertions of propaganda by the MAGA cult and state regime media over at Fox, which had to finally admit that they lied, and they paid out more than $700 million after affirming they lied about some of the stuff they were reporting. So there was no evidence of any kind of rigging or cheating, stealing of election, nothing other than what these propagandists put out. But what we do know for a fact, and because it's not disputed, we know it happened. Prior to the election, long before the first tally, before the first vote was made, Trump and his cronies got together and they came up with this plan where they decided that the moment some district reports numbers that they don't like, they've got a scheme in place to automatically say this was rigged, it was the election's being stolen. All that was set in motion prior to the election. So when you think that, if you've been brainwashed into believing the election was stolen, do you not have a problem with the fact that those claims were put out before there was even an election, that there was a plan, a coordinated strategy to go around and start telling people the whole thing was rigged, even before anything happened? It was just part of some scheme, which for me is just another way of shitting on our democratic processes, shitting on American voters, our system. And then we've got this whole other scenario where it's not enough that we're shitting on ourselves here. They're taking it out of the country now into other areas. You've seen what's been going on with the threats against Canada and Venezuela, Greenland. And that's worth discussion because Greenland belongs to Denmark, our earliest of NATO partners. And it seems to me today sometimes people know more about the Kardashians than they do the history of our own country. And here in Florida, they're beginning to forbid teaching of history, unless it's the history promoted by Governor Ron DeSantis. So, I want to speak about senseless shit. I'm going to talk about history. Back in the 1940s, we had this little episode called World War II, where countries from around the world joined the United States to fight the Nazi German scourge, as well as the imperial tyranny of Japan. And collectively, we achieved victory over the axis of evil in Europe and the Pacific. And afterwards, some of these same nations said, let's get together and sign a treaty. They said, this can never happen again. And to help ensure that, these countries signed a treaty, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which essentially said from now on, should anyone ever try to go this direction, we're making an agreement that to attack one is the same as attacking all. And if any one of our member countries is confronted with an outside threat, they don't have to contend with that threat on their own accord, because we are going to come to their aid to support them in their time of critical need. That is what NATO represents. And for more than 50 years, that collaboration has been the greatest source of security and assurance of peace, or diminishing the escalation of war. NATO has stood by, the countries have stood by saying, we're ready. If someone needs help, they're ready to respond to it. That's what NATO represents. And Denmark was one of our earliest of NATO partners. So it's kind of reprehensible that we're talking now about we're threatening our friend, our ally, our neighbor to the north in Canada, Venezuela. What a joke. How would you feel about your son or daughter, someone in your family getting deployed into some conflict, unnecessary conflict, simply due to the whims of some spoiled, petulant child, such as the orange skin, bleach blonde, bloated con job is? Someone who doesn't understand the first thing about integrity, discipline, service to a greater cause other than yourself, sacrifice. This guy has no cognizance of these kind of ideals, has no standing as the draft-dodging son of a racist slumlord, has no standing to be the commander and sleeves of our armed forces, and just seems reprehensible. It's another example of how he's shitting on our soldiers, shitting on our friends, our country. And the thing about shit is, sometimes even after it's flushed, there's still the lingering odor. But the point is, at some point there will be a paradigm shift. It might even be happening now. And these sacks of crap that we're suffering with, they will get flushed into the sewer of obscurity. But even when they're gone, there will still be this lingering stench of what they've done in terms of the demoralization, in terms of the fractures in trust, the diminished respect for our country on the world stage. It might take decades before the air clears. And it just seems so god-awful to me. I don't know if it matters to you, but what I want to say is, if you care about these things, I hope you'll make more of an effort to speak out against it and join me in maybe just saying this shit has to stop. That's all I have to say for now. I'll hope to see you again.